By the end of this video, we will have created several varieties of fruit pickups, which, when collected, will restore our players' health. Let's get started. To begin, let's create our fruit animation. Within the Pixel Adventure 1 sprite package, we have this fruits folder and it contains a variety of fruits. I'll go ahead and drag the apple into the scene, like so, and that will ask me to create an animation. I'll go to my animations folder, make a new folder, call this fruits, go inside, and I will just call this apple. My apple is over here, and I'll go ahead and just rename that apple. Then I'll go to the sprite renderer, I'll change its sorting layer to game, and set its order in layer to 4. It's looking a bit small, so let's try changing this to something like 22 pixels, and that looks like a decent size, so I'm just going to do the same for all these others because I know they're going to have the same problem. So we'll just make all of these fruits 22 pixels per unit. If I click on my apple and go to the animation tab, it has an animation called apple, and there we go. You can see it's playing just fine, but we'll also need to do a couple of other things to it. Number one, we'll need to make sure that it does have an animator by default, but we'll also need to give it a box collider 2D, and we'll just take a look at the boundaries. It's a little too big, so I'm just going to make sure these are appropriately sized for our pickup. There we go, that seems good. And we're also going to make sure is trigger is checked, because we don't want the player to have any physical collisions with this apple. Is trigger is more like crossing a finish line on a racetrack. You need to know you cross the finish line, but you don't need to collide with it. Let's go to the animations folder for fruits, and we'll take a look at the animator for the apple. Here we go, we have one base layer that's apple, and then I also noticed that in this Pixel Adventure folder, we have something here called collected. So let's make an animation for that too. In my fruits folder, I'll right click, and I'll go create a new animation and call this collected. And then I'm gonna go ahead and create one more and just call this animation off. Now I'm going to drag collected in, and I'm going to put it underneath apple, and then I'm going to drag off in and put it underneath this. I'll go to parameter and create a trigger, and we'll call this collect, and then I'll right click on apple, say make transition, we'll go to collected, and we'll change this transition to have a transition duration of 0. We'll change the exit time to 1, and then we'll just uncheck as exit time. We'll also make sure to go to the conditions and click this plus button, so we have to have this trigger condition launched in order to have the item collected. We'll right click, make transition, go to off, and we'll click on this arrow, set the transition duration to 0, and the exit time to 1. There we go. And we don't want any conditions, so we just want collected to play once and then for it to go to off. In the animator itself, let's take a look at the collected animation. I'll go to the scene view so we can see what we're doing. And here we're going to add some extra sprites. So we have this collected animation, so we can drag it in properly. I'll drag the animation tab up here, shift select all of them, and just drag them in. If I test it out, the animation is going to be a little bit fast right now. So what I can do is drag this endpoint over to about 20 frames, try it out again. Okay, that looks a little better to me. Then I'm going to select the off animation, and I'm going to click on the apple. I'm going to click the little record button, and I'm going to uncheck the box collider, and I'm going to uncheck the sprite renderer. Oh, also on collected, I'm also going to hit record, and I'm going to uncheck the box collider here too, because once it's been collected, I don't want there to be any further collisions with this apple. Let's go ahead and drag this apple into the prefabs folder to turn it into a prefab. And now we want to make some additional prefabs for the other fruits, but we don't want to have to set this whole thing up again. Fortunately, Unity has some built-in tools that will help us with this. I'm going to click on the apple and rename it to kiwi, and then I'm going to go back up to the animations folder into fruits. I'm going to right click, go to create, and create an Animator Override Controller and name this kiwi. Now I'm going to right click, I'm going to create an animation and also name this kiwi. I'll go ahead and click on this now kiwi fruit. I'll go to the animator component and I'll drag this Animator Override Controller in. We won't see any changes yet, but if we click on this Animator Override Controller, we can drag the apple into here as this is the base animation. And immediately we see that it has some original clips and some override clips. We can drag this kiwi into the apple, and then leave the collected and the off alone because we don't want to change those. Now, if we click on our kiwi, go to the animation, I'm going to drag this window back up here. We'll go into the fruits folder, look for the kiwi, select all of these, and just drag them in. There we go. Now, if I go to test it out, if I click on the kiwi, let me drag the animation back here, play this one, and there we go, it plays. And the rest of the animator is already set up properly. I don't have to change the collected or the off or redo any of the transitions because all we're doing is we're just overriding the fruit animation that's playing. I do notice though that the kiwi is playing way too fast, so I'm gonna drag this out here to 104, which is the same length as our apple. So there we go, that looks a little better. Now just so it's clear that this is a kiwi, I'm also going to take the first kiwi and drag it into the sprite renderer component over here. And now I'm going to go back to the prefabs folder. These are our prefabs, and I'm going to drag this kiwi in again, but this time I'm going to make it a prefab variant. So basically, if we make any changes to the apple, which is the base fruit, those changes will also take place on the kiwi and any other prefab variants of it, but any changes on the kiwi specifically will not affect the apple. It only goes one way. Now let's go into our into our scripts folder, go create a new C# script, and let's name it fruit. We'll go back to the prefabs folder, click on the apple, which is the base prefab, and I'll just go to add component, select fruit, and it's going to add that script. If we look at the kiwi, we'll see it also has the fruit script on it because it's a variant of the apple. Just for good measure, I'm also going to delete this kiwi from the scene for now so we don't get confused. Now let's write some code that will let us collect our fruit item. We already have a player collision script, so I think that's a good place to start. Because this is a trigger, we don't want to use onCollisionEnterToDee. We're going to make a new method, and this is built into Unity, and it's going to be called private onTriggerEnter2D. And here we can say if other.compareTag is fruit, which we'll set up momentarily, then we'll call a method within this fruit script. In the fruit script, we'll go ahead and delete start and update. We'll write public void collect, and we should also create a serialized field, private int, and then we'll call this health recovered. And we'll also need a reference to our animator, so we'll just make private animator. Then within the collect method, we can write animator.setTrigger collect, and we can also do something with this health recovered, and for that we'll make another public static action, pass through an int, and we'll say on fruit collected. Here we can say on fruit collected dot invoke and then pass through the amount of health recovered. That should be good enough for here. Back within the player collision script, we'll say other.getComponent fruit, and then we'll call collect. Perfect. Oh, and one more thing we might want to do is just assign health recovered a default value. I'll say 2 for now. Let's hop on over to our player health script, and we can make a private void, and we can call this restore health and take in an int health restored, and then we can say our current health plus equals the health restored amount. So there we go. And just for good measure, we'll also clamp our current health variable using current health equals mathf.clamp, write current health, and then say between 0 and our max health amount. There we go. And finally, in order to invoke this method, we'll subscribe to the listener we just created using onEnable and also onDisable. In here, I can write fruit.onFruitCollected plus equals restore health. Copy that, paste it down here, and change the plus to a minus. And then within here, we'll also do one more thing. We already have an action for onPlayer take damage, but we'll also do one for onPlayer restore health. And then here, within the restore health, we can do the same thing, say onPlayer restore health dot invoke, and then we can pass through our current health. There's also one more thing we should do. We're already using an action here to take into consideration when our health is changing. But now that we're also restoring health, this name for the action doesn't make sense. So let's just rename this to on player health changed. And then we can take this line, copy it, and just paste it down here. Without doing anything else, this will properly update our health bar at the same time whenever we restore health. Back within Unity, we can go to our prefabs folder, select our apple, take a look at the fruit script and make sure that the animator is hooked up to it. So drag that in there. And now we can drag a couple of fruit objects into our scene just to test that they're working properly. So here's a fruit, and here's a kiwi, and let's hit play. So there is an error immediately, tag fruit is not defined, which is of course true because we forgot to set up the tag first. So let's go back into the prefabs folder, click on the tag, go to add tag, hit plus and write fruit. And then we'll have to once again go into the prefabs folder, click on the apple and assign that tag. By default, the kiwi also gets assigned as it's a variant. Let's test that out again. Here comes our enemy. It's going to boop us. We lose some health. And now we can pick up that apple, and yep. And then we pick up the kiwi and we restore some more health. And conveniently, if we want, we can change the health amount individually for any of these types of fruits. So we can go ahead and create some different varieties and then have each one of them restore different amounts of health. Pretty cool. I'll leave it to you to create the rest of your prefab variants and your Animator Override controllers, but just one note, make sure that you create them all from the base, which in my case is the apple. Don't create the prefab variants from another prefab variant, otherwise then it just might get a little out of control. So again, create all your variants from the base prefab only. There we go. I've created a variety of different health pickups in my scene with different fruits, Animator Override controllers that each can restore various amounts of health. Looking pretty good. In the next video, we'll be adding a UI counter to keep track of how many fruit objects our player is picking up. And we'll also be using horizontal layout groups to make this happen. See you there.